Over the last year, we've all been shocked at how fast AI is developing. Most of us are familiar with the large language models like ChatGPT, Grok, and others, but few are even aware of what's about to come with robotics. These LLMs are trained on textual data, and some are adding images, audio, and video. But what happens if you're able to add visual data? For humans, our eyes are our dominant input sense. At 10 million bits per second of input, it allows us to form memories, guide decision making, and facilitates learning. Today, let's learn more about Tesla's humanoid bot Optimus and how it will dramatically change AI forever. Phil Beisel was a founding member of the technical team at Rivian, an electric vehicle maker. He led several key groups, including vehicle UI, mobile, and cloud. Before Rivian, he held various engineering management roles at Apple. Welcome, Phil. Thank you very much for joining me again.
Yes, Herbert. Nice to be back.
So you and I did a video a month or two ago, and it was incredibly well received. People enjoyed you explaining LLMs and how the different AIs that Tesla's doing. Today, we're going to dive deeper into Optimus and its AI, and you'll point out that how vision really makes all the difference. So this all started because you had a post on X, and you do this quite often, and you always get multi-million views on it. And this one was over 2.5 million. And even Elon Musk forwarded this and replied to it. So you basically did an article on Tesla Optimus and you titled it, I Know What I See. So we're going to basically go through and teach us things that was on this article, right?
Yeah, I mean, it was a lot of fun to do this. Having Elon reposted was sort of a bit of a validation.
Yeah.
Because, it's kind of, there's a lot of dense material in there. So he had to spend quality time to determine that it was making some sense. So that's quite nice, actually. I mean, the point of this is the whole point of this is that I see the vision system of Optimus as a means to move it from what will be a 1.0 version, which will be a productivity machine, to a 2.x version, which will be a reasoning machine. And we'll get into the details a bit about why I think the vision sense is so important to that.
Wow. Okay. This is big deal. We're just starting to see these bots come out. And at first, they're going to help us do tasks. But you're going to show that as they get more data, specifically vision data and the other senses data, which is so hard for other companies to be able to get that data. We're going to play a video later of Elon Musk talking about how it is that when a bot pours water into a cup, he looks into it, there is information there that you can't get from YouTube and other videos. Right. So this is great. I love it. So explain to us a little bit more about the difference between LLMs and Tesla bot. And then we saw this, I think. Didn't we see this slide the last time we did a show? Yeah.
Yes. I wanted to kind of briefly put this in here just to kind of set the groundwork for what we're going to talk about as to what the domain, what does Tesla do and what does XAI do?
Yeah.
Because in some ways we're merging the two concepts in this discussion. Tesla AI is really principally a vision-based AI system, and obviously it's purposed towards FSD, and of course will be purposed towards Optimus in terms of guiding its autonomous actions. So what you'll see in the first versions of these things, and of course what FSD does today, is that vision is really there to facilitate the perception and planning, right, so that it can augment the controls or can actuate the controls of the of either the vehicle or the Optimus bot. And if we look at the other side of the slide here, where we're talking about XAI, which is also an Elon Musk company, so this was founded 1+ years ago. This is essentially an LLM based AI today. I'm sure it'll progress into other things, but what we discussed last time is that this is really a language data based AI system, and this will be used as licensed back by Tesla as a user interface for both the vehicle, for robotaxi, as well as the user interface to Optimus.
Do you have a guess of why you think that they have not yet shown that XAI, like be able to talk to your car, ask it questions, answer back, those kind of things?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I would probably suggest that speech to text, text to speech is under development at this time. The language model is pretty well, Grok is great and it's catching ChatGPT, but I mean, it's going to take some time, I think, to integrate it into the vehicle proper. And it'll be awesome because that's how we'll interact with our vehicles. I mean,
Yeah.
particularly, rideshare customers, that's how they'll interact with the vehicle. They won't be using
Yeah.
the screen very much. They'll just be talking to it. So, and then the last time we talked, I gave some examples of how um, you would talk to the vehicle and why you would talk to the vehicle.
Yeah, I can't wait for that. That will be a huge milestone when that demo comes out, or
I
when
know
we
it's gonna be
can
great.
actually
It's gonna be
physically
awesome.
do it. It's gonna be awesome. Okay, so let's get started here.
All right. So this slide, what I'm talking about is AI knowledge in general, and
Mhm.
specifically, I want to talk about LLMs because we're quite familiar with them. I mean, we call them chatbots or AI assistants. The good examples are ChatGPT, Grok. There's Gemini. There's which is a Google version. There's Microsoft has a version. There's several out there, and I think a lot of us have interacted with these. Um, they're called large language models because they are
Mm.
trained on principally textual data, and a lot of it. Web pages, like essentially crawling the web in a curated way that determine what they want to look at, and of course books, the things that haven't been digitized or put on the web that have a lot of knowledge in them. And if you look at, say, Chat GPT, where we first were introduced to this, it was
Mhm.
about 570 megabytes of textual data, which is
Mhm.
which is a lot. um, it's rumored that ChatGPT 4, which I don't think is disclosed quite publicly, is about 50 terabytes or 10 trillion words worth of
Wow.
textual data. That's a lot. Um, and now what's happening is that we're starting to go multimodal. So we're starting to train on images, audio, and video. And there's a reason for that. We've run out of information to train on.
Yeah.
While we think of text data as infinite, it's not. It's it's even a couple terabytes is not a lot in the end. And what you see with what's happening with the training on these models is that they're really just building more associations or linkages or parameters associated with the relationships of words, and not really about more data in. Um, and of course, the goal of this
Right.
is, I guess, it's stated by many as the goal is AGI or artificial general intelligence. But I think, in a sense, that these will all come short, and a couple of reasons is they will not have enough data. Number one, and they won't have the type of data that really is what I call the physics model. And that is that a way that allows us to understand how we interact with the natural world. Um, and I mean, I like to say is you can read about physics, but when you experience it, you know. um,
Yeah.
and so the premise of this is that where I think we're heading is that we need more data, and we need more data about the real world, and that data will largely come from Optimus through its vision system, and that's what I want to talk about.
Nice. Exactly. This is such a good setup. Explaining this. Yeah. That text data is so small, right? So people say you can actually get the whole world's entire history data into, you know, to a little hard drive in your hand, palm of your hand. It's actually not that hard. It's not
It's
it, but
pretty, yeah, it's pretty
yeah,
incredible. I mean, it seems like a lot until you actually
yeah.
think about that you can store that on a flash drive at home pretty easily.
Yeah. But it's the vision data that's missing out there, and you can't get it from just YouTube videos that are out there.
Yeah, and you have
Okay, yeah,
to
yeah.
realize that, vision data on something like Optimus, 1 day's worth of full resolution data is probably exceeds um, multi terabytes of information from text systems.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of data. So this slide talks about human vision, and I think it's important to understand this a little bit as kind of a backdrop to what we're talking about. Is that vision is our dominant input sense. Um, it runs about estimates about 10 million bits per second of input through the visual cortex, um, and in comparison, if you drop down to hearing and touch, which is about an order of magnitude, about 1 million bits per second, and then
Mm-hmm.
it drops off another order of magnitude, another order of magnitude for smell and taste. So
Mm-hmm.
it's the predominant way we get data. Um, and it's thought to be equivalent to about 5 to 15 megapixels at 30 to 60 frames a second,
Frames per second.
depending on,
Yeah.
I know it's funny, but depending on context, really.
Right.
There's, a whole set of kind of, in our whole vision system, we don't just record everything. We have a kind of a compression model, which I don't think is well understood. I mean, it's not well understood by me, but ultimately that's kind of how we get that number from the input side, the raw input side. And what do we do with it? I mean, we do all
Mm.
these things like form memories and guide our decision making, facilitate learning, recognize objects in the natural world, and gives us complete spatial awareness, which is sort of what I was saying about the physics model. Um, so as we start to think about Optimus as a humanoid bot with eyes, well, you can see that that also be its predominant sense.
Yeah. And right now, Tesla has, and Elon has repeated this many times, every vehicle is a bots on wheels. In each one of them has 8 or 9 cameras, eight
That's true.
external cameras,
Yeah.
and they're capturing the world. And then Ashok Goswami, the vice president of autonomy, has done presentations showing that the car with that vision is able to understand the world. Like it knows what a fire hydrant is.
Yeah.
It knows what a curb is. It knows it can read signs. And Elon has said it can read multiple language of signs, and it can know, it actually knows what fog is. So it's learning the world. It's not just, pixels on a screen. It's actually like understanding
Yeah.
it, right?
I mean, the principal difference of the four-wheeled robot
Yeah.
known as a vehicle and the two-legged robot known as Optimus, the principal difference is there's more cameras on the car, but the car is also confined to certain places. It can
Hmm.
only go to certain places where Optimus is much more free to roam.
Yeah.
I mean, it can, Optimus can see every street, but it could also see every pathway, inside buildings, inside malls, So uh, the big difference here, I mean, in some ways, we could have this discussion and call the vehicle, I mean, we could talk about the vision of the vehicle and it learning, but ultimately it can't experiment as well. And then
Yeah.
we'll talk about that in a minute too. So,
I just realized a humanoid bot could actually grab a telescope and look at the universe too, just like we do.
all right.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean,
I mean,
that's the thing is that the bot can do things, whereas the car can
yeah.
drive and the car can drive and see, and it can do a lot of the things. If you actually at the end of this presentation think about what the car can do relative to what we're talking about Optimus, there's a lot of overlap clearly. Yeah.
All right, so Optimus sees. Love it.
Okay, so Optimus sees. Yeah, I mean Optimus has eyes. In
Hmm.
this case, by using cameras, it records video. There's two front-facing eyes and one rear-facing eye. Um, and I mean, uh, there's a lot of purposes. There's a lot of potential purposes for that rear eye, but mostly I think initially it'll be
Charging.
used for docking for the charging
Yeah.
station. But ultimately, you could imagine that they might change this and make it more of kind of like the way our vehicles have like 8 eyes, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and so that they can see in the rear and they can see forward as well. So why does what do we expect this to do? Um, in the beginning, what I think we'll see, and I'll call this just version one of Optimus, is that it'll use its inference process. That's the process is the process, the model, to perceive the environment, to plan its actions, so it can actuate its controls, right? And it'd be very straightforward, I think. And I call this the productivity machine phase of Optimus.
Mm.
Um, but the point is that Optimus can build knowledge with visual data. And the first way to talk about that is something I call deep observation. And this is sort of like, in a way, how Optimus is different than a human. So humans really are compressing visual data all the time. And you know that by what is available to you in your memory. Um, and a good way of thinking about it is that if you walk in a room that you're familiar with, what you probably remember about that visit is things that have changed.
Hmm.
Maybe you left a piece of clothing there, you left your wallet there, you left your keys there. You probably aren't recording all the data of what's in that room. I mean,
Hmm.
like the idea is that if you have a homeowner's insurance policy, it's a good idea to walk in the room with the video camera and video everything, because what do you actually remember, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So humans work that way, but Optimus is very much free from this constraint in the sense every frame every frame is available to it at all times, and so in a way, it could really observe the world in a
Hmm.
very what I call unparalleled level of granularity, right? That a human really doesn't approach. Um, and that opens up some really interesting cases. So on the next slide, I can talk about
Yeah,
that.
it's like a photographic memory, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just
I mean, if
one shot,
it's
and every little pixel on that, you can know everything.
right,
You
it's
know.
only a limit to the processing power it has,
Hmm.
and assuming that um, that's a respectable amount, then yeah, it's picking up every detail at all
I,
times.
I'd like to play Elon's interview with
Hmm.
Lex Friedman. Is that a good time to do that now?
Training computer is kind of like the engine. How many there's horsepower of the engine. So you want to try to do the best on that, and you then so how efficiently do you use that training compute, and how efficiently do you do the inference, the use of the AI? Um, so obviously that comes down to human talent, and then what unique access to data do you have? That's also plays a role.
You think Twitter data would be useful?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think most of the leading AI companies have already scraped all the Twitter data. Not I think they have. So I don't know, on a go forward basis, what's
Yes.
useful is the fact that it's up to the second. You know,
Yes.
that's because it's hard for them to scrape in real time. So there's an immediacy advantage that Grok has already. I think with Tesla and the real time video coming from the several million cars, ultimately tens of millions of cars, with Optimus, there might be hundreds of millions of Optimus robots, maybe billions, learning a tremendous amount from the real world. That's the biggest source of data. I think ultimately is sort of Optimus. Probably Optimus is going to be the biggest source of data
Because it's
because
able to.
reality scales. Reality scales to the scale of reality. It's actually humbling to see how little data humans have actually been able to accumulate. Really, if you say how many trillions of usable tokens have humans generated, where on a non-duplicative, like discounting spam and repetitive stuff, it's not a huge number. You run out pretty quickly.
And Optimus can go. So Tesla cars are unfortunately have to stay on the road. Optimus robot can go anywhere. And there's
Yeah.
more reality off the road and go off road.
I mean, like the Optimus robot can like pick up the cup and see, did it pick up the cup in the right way? Did it,
Yeah.
say pour water in the cup?
Yeah.
Did the water go in the cup or not go in the cup? Did it spill water or not?
Yeah.
Simple stuff like that. I mean, but it can do at scale times a billion. So generate useful data from reality. So cause and effect stuff.
What do you think it takes to get to mass production of humanoid robots?
Change the topic there, but he basically was saying what you're saying. Isn't that perfect? Isn't that perfect? Like knowing how to pour the cup in the water in the cup, and the Optimus can see inside of it. It's learned a lot about the environment,
Yeah, I
just
mean,
like we do. You can't get that from YouTube videos. Not everything.
right. There's a lot of points there, and said better than me. But yeah, I mean, what Elon's pointing out is that the world is, well, LLMs are essentially data starved at some
Mhm.
level. The world is filled with a lot more uh, data to be had. That's principally visual data, and well, the cars can accumulate a heck of it, a heck of a lot of it. It's stuck on the road, as Lex pointed out. So Optimus truly does go off road and can explore the world and accumulate data that's unprecedented in scale and process it. So yeah.
Great. Okay. Let's. What does Optimus know?
Yeah. So this is really, I think, a really good way to ground this discussion. And the first one I want to talk about is just some examples of counting.
Hmm.
And this will sound very simple, but when you understand the power of this, it kind of blows your mind. So in the paper, in the article, I wrote a little bit about an example that what happens when counting is effectively effortless, right? So this doesn't mean that in this case, counting is something that
Oh.
that the Optimus bot can do purely with its eyes. I mean, clearly it
Yeah.
might need to be moved, it might move itself into position, but it
Hmm.
doesn't need to do much other than look. And so that's why I put this up front, because I'm talking principally about vision data. So imagine the one I talked about in the article is that imagine that a high school student is tasked with counting the number of leaves that appear on the tree starting in winter through spring, right? And if you think about that task, I mean, we do these kinds of experiments all the time where we try to go off and count different things. But imagine trying to do that, on day one, one leaf appears, day two, three leaves appear. By day 10, it's an overwhelming task and you really can't complete it, right? By the time there's 1,000 leaves on the tree, you can't possibly do that task, to try to figure out what's new. And, you might correlate that with other data like rainfall or humidity or amount of sun per day. Maybe that's why we're doing it. But the point is, just counting alone is not actually very easy. An optimist could look at that tree and have an instant count. And not only
Hmm.
could it look at that tree, but it could look at every deciduous tree on your property or in your neighborhood. And then you could actually task an entire fleet to do the same thing and
Hmm.
aggregate that data and get a better, statistical representation. So if you think about the kinds of experiments where you have to count things, most of them are probably statistically incorrect, because you just don't have enough data and you can't do it at scale. I'll give you another example. The idea of doing inventory at a store. Imagine you own a hardware store, or maybe imagine it's a Home Depot or a Lowe's, and maybe every month, at the end of the month, you do an inventory. You close the store early, or you count overnight. You have all your employees walk out and count the number of objects to determine shrinkage. Right? This is commonly done. Um, but what if Optimus could do that? And what if it could do it? What if it just did it once a day,
Hmm.
or maybe once an hour? Because it is, in fact, effortless. A third example, which is an interesting one, is imagine that the city buys a series of Optimus bots to clean the streets. So they're power washing streets, they're taking out trash, picking up garbage on the streets, etc. Imagine while they're doing that, they're counting. They're counting the number of people, counting number of males versus females, the number of children, the
Yeah.
age demographics, what kind of clothing these people wear, whether they're in a rush, um, what stores they go in, how much stuff they carry out of the stores. I mean, there's a whole issue of privacy concerns here, but I'm not trying to address that. I'm just saying that Optimus can literally count that stuff with no effort at all. And if you could imagine trying to task humans to do any of these things, I mean, we already know how inventory works, right? The stores typically are closed early just to do an inventory run, maybe every month or so. So that's awesome, and Optimus hasn't really lifted a finger to do that. It's just used its visual system to do that. Um, then we can talk about experimentation, and I think that the difference here is that in this case we're actually doing something more than observing, right? So let's say, give you two examples. Let's say that we task Optimus in a factory.
Hmm.
And one of the tasks that we say is Optimus will gather stuff from the warehouse to bring to the factory floor for builds, right? Parts. Um, and so maybe it goes into the warehouse and it's kind of given a way to do this. But it soon learns that there are more efficient routes. It can build, what does efficiency mean? Time and energy use. It can limit its amount of energy use or limit the time it takes to gather stuff from inventory to bring it to the floor. And so in this case, it's a learning system, right? It's learned these things by using its vision system. Um, Another example is that if it's used to operate a machine itself, like a molding machine, it could change the dynamics of that machine to see what creates the most efficiency, just like a human would do, really. So these examples here are, one is meant to be pretty much hands off, the counting examples. A lot of power in that because there's a lot of compute, and Optimus can see every frame of all the data and do it quickly. And then we're dropping into much more higher end stuff, the experimentation. So that's what I think Optimus ends up doing with its vision system.
It's brilliant. This is great. It just opened up my mind here. Like now that you explained the counting leaves as first, right? For example, and it's not even counting it, right? It's just a snapshot, and it can,
Right.
like you said, move its head over and immediately know how much. Well, can it do that? Well, in my landscaping, in my yard, it can probably know based on, like you said, the weather and everything, that whether or not my tree or shrubs are dying early or not dying early, they need support.
Mhm.
Well, they'll know that sooner than a landscaper or I can figure things out. That's just one example, but like you said, there's so
I
many.
mean, it
This is
could literally
limitless.
count the growth of every blade of grass.
Yeah, that's a little
I
too
mean,
much, but yeah,
a lot of
theoretically.
these things seem incredibly silly until
Yeah.
you start thinking about how you put them to use.
Mm,
Uh, so yeah,
that's brilliant. I love this. Okay, so just two examples, but it's limitless. Just this ability. Why vision on? But like what you're saying is that vision on bots and humans are similar in many ways, but there's things that the bots can do that humans can't, and
right.
that's why it's that much more important. Yeah, but okay.
So this might be the most important slide, and maybe the funnest one to talk about actually
Mhm.
is, it's a little bit about how we do AI processing today, and versus where I think we need to go. Um, and I call it centralized versus decentralized. There might be other ways to label it, but let's talk about FSD, right? Talk about how this works. So what happens on device, in this case, on device is the car, is that it collects a lot of video data, right? And what it does is it takes a certain amount of that video data and it transfers it to Tesla's data center. How much is really up to Tesla, of course, and what kinds of data is also up to Tesla. But you have a fleet of I don't know, a building fleet of about 6 million Teslas on the road that can collect data and send it up. Um, and then what happens is, through a data pipeline and a process, they go through a training process at the data center. So it's centralized. All right. And they output a model. And we know these models by names like version 12.6, version 13.2.1, et cetera. And then that model makes its way down to the vehicle. And then through the inference process, um, it does its thing, which drives the car.
Yeah.
Right. So essentially, it's a very asymmetric thing. What happens is there's a data collection piece that's happening on the vehicle, makes its way to the data center. All the training is done in the data center. The models move
Hmm.
back down to the car, and then the
Hmm.
car, through what the process we're calling inference, is just basically does the thing that drives the vehicle using the model. All right. Now, in the beginning, this is probably how the Optimus works as a productivity machine. It's probably trained statically at a data center. It gets a model, it's downloaded, it's pushed into the Optimus bot. However, what's very likely to occur is localized training, where we do specific training by maybe the human is guiding the bot, a particular type of thing. For example, this is kind of a contrived example, but imagine that you say to Optimus, "Please slice me an apple,"
Mm.
and it brings you over an apple, and in the process, it's peeled it as well, but you
Hmm.
didn't want it peeled,
Hmm.
and maybe it just had that idea because through training, it normally is peeling fruits, bananas and oranges, etc. So you say to Optimus, hey, next time you do this, you don't need to peel it, just slice it.
Mm.
Right. So that can be a localized training process. It's training, right? It's learning from that. And it's probably augmenting the model locally. And then what can happen is those changes to the model that are decentralized across different robots and different homes or different factories can be brought back to the data center and rebuild a global model. So in a sense, what you have is an aggregated learning process, right? And it's cool if you think about it because it's kind of what we do as humans,
Mhm.
just sort of inefficiently. And how would we do that as human? Well, let's say you learn about something and then you write about it. And when you write about it, other people read about it. And that kind of goes out to, once it's published, assuming it's available to everybody, assuming everybody reads it, it's now global knowledge, right? But only one human learned about it in the process.
Mhm.
And this is, I think, where we'll see Optimus as well. It will learn on site. It will take that, augment its own models, push some of those changes back. How it does that is beyond the scope of this conversation and beyond my
Mhm.
knowledge of how it would do it. But move those learnings back to the data center and have it build a new model that can be pushed to the entire fleet. And in fact, what I'm really trying to say is that the population of Optimus bots can learn much quicker than humans because the information can be made globally available as quickly as the global model is trained. Hopefully, I
Wow.
made some sense of
Okay.
that.
Oh, tremendous amount of sense. I'm loving this so much. Okay. The reason I just looked it up is version 13 for the FSD cars. One of the line items was dynamic routing. Let me read it to you. It's
Hmm,
dynamic routing around road closures, which displays them along an effective route when they are detected by the fleet.
fleet, right? Yeah,
So what they're talking about is that when a Tesla car sees something, road closure, police, whatever it is, it will beam that info up. And so that the
right,
following Tesla car coming into that same location, it'll say,
right,
hey, be aware of what's up there. That's already happening now. What you're saying is that imagine if you have millions of bots, each of them are like daily, second wise, they're seeing something and they learn something, they're going to beam that back. And so, and then that will be distributed to the fleet. And so eventually you're saying that you'll have more bot training then on the training servers, it'll actually be happening at decentralized at
yeah.
every single bot.
It's
Yeah.
decentralized, distributed training, then brought back and reaggregated. I mean,
Yeah.
it's actually a bit mind blowing if you think about what happens with a bot. And the car example is really cool, and but it's pretty narrow. Like you can, right? But the bot is out doing all sorts of things in the physical world and learning like a human learns.
Yeah.
And as humans, the point I was making is how we get that information out to other humans is we either teach them, maybe we make videos like this, or maybe we write it down like articles, and then we push it out or books, and we teach children in school, etc. But the process is pretty slow, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it takes a long time to teach a child through a series of things. Um, and for example, if you had an Optimist that um, did something like stepped off a curb and fell
Uh-huh.
and and literally damaged itself and sort of learned from that information could be brought back. Maybe it's a specific kind of physics configuration of that curb, right? And that information can be brought back, retrained, and now by the next morning, the entire fleet doesn't do that again. I mean,
Yeah. No, a couple of examples would be, of course, if you teach one bot how to play ping pong or tennis,
right,
every bot can immediately get that skill. If every bot is in every one of our homes, in your home, my home, I probably have a different fridge, a different microwave. different way. My fridge, you open it by pulling it from this long, other people you pull this way, other people you press a button to open the fridge, whatever. Right. All of a sudden, every bot knows every fridge.
Right. That's where it gets super exciting, because there's this like intense and real-time feedback loop occurring.
Yeah.
And the learnings that occur are quickly disseminated to the fleet.
My God.
Whereas the human system is so much slower, right?
Yeah.
Through how we teach and learn. And it's also segmented too, if you think about it. It's like only certain maybe demographics or groups of society get information handed down or taught from others, and it becomes segmented. Whereas now you can take that information across the entire fleet. So maybe there might be customs in a home that are done in downtown Moscow. I mean, I don't know, I haven't been there, but how you do certain things, and you're teaching the bot to do these things in that way. And all of a sudden, everyone in the US knows that. And maybe it's applicable. Maybe it's not, but maybe it is. So it's incredible. I don't know, it's just an incredible quick pickup. I mean, it's sort of like the counting example multiplied, because the counting example says that I can do this effortlessly. But these examples say, well, I can learn things and disseminate that knowledge effortlessly. And the other word is quickly.
It's unlimited. We can probably come up with multiple unlimited examples of what this
and
means.
it's huge. What's also super interesting about it is it brings up a whole issue of like just disseminating the information to the fleet may be something that has to be restricted, because maybe certain
marketplace.
I mean, yeah. So for example, you might say this company employs 1,000 Optimus in the factory. It learns to do a certain set of tasks. They don't want to proliferate that. That's considered, their secret sauce. So it brings up slightly different issues.
Yeah. I mean, it's as simple as I was talking to Scott Walter about that. If you're a banana distributor, one of your advantages over other banana distributors is that you have less, what do you call it, bruises on your bananas. And the reason is that they have a very approach of when to pick it, when to grab it, how to move it, what back, and you don't want anybody to know that, because I mean, obviously this is that's a bit of a dumb example, because I'm sure all banana distributors do exactly the same thing as everyone else by now. There's no secret sauce here, but that's the point. Like you're saying, some of them have trade secrets. They don't want everybody to know what they do differently. So,
right. So you can't just merely aggregate the information. And so it might require a lot of the skills to get kind of labeled or reviewed before they're pushed back. And it does, it's interesting, because I think the way we see these things making their way into the world is that Tesla will probably lease them by the hour or by the day or something. And so that sort of says that Tesla has ownership, right? I mean, as Elon has said, I want to control the stop button. But on a more simplistic thing is like it's you didn't buy these things yourself and then have 1,000 of them running around. And you train them, because I mean, imagine that you're a factory, you buy you have 1,000 employed. Imagine you want to add another 1,000. The cool thing about Optimus is that you can take the training that have been pushed across that 1,000 and replicate it on the other 1,000 instantaneously, right? There's no effort.
Yeah.
I mean, that's so different than it's so different than training an employee, right? I mean, you bring an employee into a Starbucks or a restaurant, you have to go, well, this is the way we do things. But imagine bringing an employee in and you just simply say, well, I'm just going to replicate the brain to this employee, and it completely has best practices.
Yeah, it's one thing to sell the hardware. It's another thing for the software and the skill sets. And that's where, Tesla can go ahead and buy 1,000 bots. But if you have to lease or, rent the skill sets that we're going to, rent to you and restrict to you. And if you try to use it for military purposes, we'll just shut it down. Right. You can have the bots if you want. You can own it. Okay, this is fun. That is very interesting, mind-opening to try to realize what would happen when you have thousands, millions, hundreds of millions of bots out there. The learning is going to be incredible, and this is why you're saying from a productivity machine to a reasoning machine.
Yeah. So this is the last slide here, and the basic point I'm saying is that your version 1.0 Optimus is probably really focused on being a productivity machine, doing certain tasks very, very well. With great precision, great efficiency, and being able to repeat those tasks. And that's kind of what we'll call phase one. But the cool thing is these are software systems that can be upgraded. And as the AI gets better, they'll become reasoning machines so that they can make more and like literally informed decisions the way we do based on observed data. And that's when it gets very powerful. And the cool thing is here
Yep.
that Tesla doesn't need that end state on day one, just like it doesn't need the end state on full self-driving. In fact, as we know, when we saw the step change in version 12, now we have version 13. Clearly, we're going to have 14, 15, 16, 17. The long tail of driving scenarios will be chopped away and possibly infinitely because it is the seemingly infinite tail. So I think the thing that we're seeing with an Optimus bot is that as we upgrade its software, it'll become more and more capable. And I did want to make a comment on its humanoid form. And there's a lot of discussion about that. Is that why would it be humanoid form? And the simple answer, it's an embodied AI, which is so different. Like we don't really, other than say FSD, what are great examples of embodied AI today, right? We think of AI as mostly being a chatbot, which is running on a server somewhere. But the thing about, the simple answer to why it's in humanoid form is because the world was built for humans. And that's talked about a lot. But I think the other, maybe more subtle reality is that because the world was built for humans, that the bot being in humanoid form will be able to learn from the physical world a lot quicker. Take a very take a large scale bot in a factory. Even if it's empowered with AI, its movement is limited. It can only experience so much in its area, whereas Optimus is free to roam and free to interact with all the objects that we built for human interaction, right? So there's two sides of that coin of why it's powerful to be in humanoid form, 2 arms, 2 legs, etc.
No, it's brilliant. So it's going to become a reasoning machine. I was just recently joking that these bots will one day become sentient. But now what you've done here is explain that yes, it has more likely chance to get sentient than not because it has these advantages, this superhuman capabilities of understanding the world more than we have. And so it might get there, becomes a reasoning machine at the very least.
Yeah,
and
the cool thing is it doesn't have to get there all at once.
Yeah,
right. It's a upgradable software system. There would be times when you look at it and you say, well, might be hardware limited. We talk about cars that way, right? We talk about well, what version of hardware does that car have, and we'll be able to do the inference required for version 13, or does it have enough cameras, or are they enough high resolution? I think as we see like Tesla evolve its vehicles, it'll put to work higher resolution, higher frame rate cameras, etc. And we may see changes in the bots in the same way. But because it's a software system, some amount of fixed hardware platform will be upgradable. I don't know, infinitely upgradable, but certainly very upgradable over time. And we'll move it from sort of simple tasking, which is what I call productivity machine, to more reasoning over time to the point where it ends up in that more sentient kind of posture. Yeah,
oh my
my
God,
mind is
very
blown every
interesting.
day when I think about this.
It is very interesting. I'm going to play a last clip here with Jensen Huang from NVIDIA, and he's talking about the move between not only artificial general intelligence, but artificial general robotics?
In a lot of ways, we're close to artificial general intelligence, but we're also close to artificial general robotics. Tokens are tokens. I mean, the question is, can you tokenize it? Of course, tokenizing things is not easy, as you guys know. But if you were able to tokenize things, align it with large language models and other modalities, if I can generate a video that has Jensen reaching out to pick up the coffee cup, why can't I prompt a robot to generate the tokens to pick up it? And so intuitively, you would think that the problem statement is rather similar for a computer. And so I think that we're that close. That's incredibly exciting. Now, the two brownfield robotic systems, brownfield meaning that you don't have to change the environment for, is self-driving cars and with digital chauffeurs and embodied robots, right? Between the cars and the human robot, we could literally bring robotics to the world without changing the world, because we built a world for those two things. It's probably not a coincidence that Elon's focused on those two forms of robotics, because it is likely to have the larger potential scale. And so I think that's exciting.
There you go.
Yeah, there's a lot packed in there, right? I mean, one, he's talking about the sensibleness of the products that Elon's bringing to market and how they fit the world we live in, that we built for ourselves. Cars and robots makes a lot of sense. He's talking about video as a potential training mechanism. But I think that what's interesting about that is I think that with Optimus, we take it a step further, because it's talking about how it's taking in video from its own eyes in its own spatial relationship and being able to do things with its hands to actually experiment. So, I think what Jensen's saying is like, okay, I could take a static video of someone pouring water in a cup or something and then train a bot. And that's possible, sure. But imagine if the bot can do that itself. And that's that experimentation phase where the bot, through its other senses, because clearly, if you think about it, its hands have touch force sensors. So it's able to actually understand that. It's like it's one thing to see someone pick up an egg.
Right.
It's another thing altogether to figure out what pressure is required to crack the egg.
Yeah.
To get it in the pan, right? And I'm sure if you just saw a video of it, you'd say, "Oh, so there's a lot of stuff that comes together when you put it in the embodied form versus just training off of static video."
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think this, episode that you just did here shows why scale matters and why first mover matters. You need as many bots out there as fast as possible, and then every one of them feeds that training, and then it becomes hard for the next follower. Yes, every bot company will succeed because there is tremendous amount of opportunity here. It's unlimited, the use cases. Those who can survive, but they'll be like, small niche markets, which is massive. We can still, each of these niche markets can still be big, right. But the one that gets, the most bots, the most training, the most thing, it's like, why would you, right? That it can do anything and everything better than, it becomes this thing where it's a network effect. The more you have out there, the more you win.
Yeah, it's clearly Tesla has some incredible advantages. I mean, first off, they built an amazing AI team. Let's not discount what's going on there. There's a lot of, I talk about it in a bunch of articles, and a lot of transference from what they've done with FSD, transferring directly into Optimus in terms of a software system, the AI system. But ultimately, perhaps their biggest advantage is their ability to manufacture at scale.
Mm-hmm.
And, they've shown themselves to be literally the best manufacturer in the world. And vehicles are hard. And I'm sure that they have learned a lot of lessons through that process and will be able to apply them quite amazingly to build Optimus at scale. So, yeah, it's really the game there is the scale game is important. And the fleet will be, it'll be I don't expect that the Tesla fleet will have much to do or help anybody else's fleet out there. It'll be, the fleet of these guys. So if you can build them at scale and you can aggregate the information that they have in the environment at scale, yeah, I think it happy days for Tesla shareholders.
Even happier days in these days.
Happier days
this
than we
is
are.
great. Fantastic presentation. I'm going to be dreaming tonight of all the, just the unlimited number of opportunities that you've described that could happen because of the skills that these bots have. So follow Phil on X at PBEISEL. Sometimes I spell you as IE, but it's EI.
Yeah, it's EI,
PBEISEL. And he has these killer articles, long form articles that teach you everything from what is Tesla FSD, the robot, accelerated computing, of course, now the advantages of the robot and the vision. Thank you so much, Phil. Looking forward to get you back on next time. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye. I've created a website that is the most comprehensive resource for the Tesla investor. Please check it out. Simply go to my website at herbertong.com.